Is it too late to take advantage of the current housing market and sell your home in order to maximize price? Should you consider selling your home? With interest rates continuing to rise, currently hitting 22-year highs, while the economy is showing signs of slowing, there's a lot of people out there wondering if they should sell their home and maybe buy in at another time in the future. Well, in today's video, we're going to go through those questions in a little bit more detail. As a real estate agent for nearly 20 years, this is a conversation I have quite often in different markets. So what I want to do today is take you through some conversations that I typically have with someone interested in selling their homes, as well as give you a couple of examples from my clients in order to help you make the best decision for yourself if you're thinking selling might be the best option for you. But before we dive into that, I'd like to take a minute and ask a favor. If you find any value in my videos at all, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on everything real estate related. Now, before we dive into the questions that I usually ask sellers when they're thinking about selling their home, I want to point out, and something that I mention often, is that real estate is local. So in my market here in Southern California, we still have very, very little inventory. Buyer demand is low, but it's keeping pace with inventory, which means that it's still more or less a seller's market out there at the moment. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your current market is doing. So just make sure you understand your market conditions in addition to answering the questions that we're going to talk about today for yourself so that you can help make the best decision for you if you're considering taking that next step. So the very first question I like to ask people, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone watching the video, is why are you planning on selling? Are you looking to move out of the area? Are you thinking that there's a housing crash coming and that prices are going to be lower in the future? Or maybe you're in a position where you own multiple homes and you're just looking to get rid of some real estate in order to free up some cash. So depending on where you are in your life, the answer to that question might be a little bit different. In addition to that, depending on your answer, my response to you might be a little bit different as well, which is going to lead us into some additional questions depending on which way you answer that question. So if you're that person that plans to sell your home, maybe you're looking to upgrade, you're looking to buy a bigger home, maybe you're looking to downsize, or maybe even move out of the area, one of the very first things I'm going to ask is, have you looked in the market to where you're looking to move and seen real estate that is presently listed for sale at the moment? And if so, what does the pricing look like on those homes? And you might be watching this going, Jeb, you're crazy. Of course I've looked at that. Why would you be asking such a dumb question? Well, a lot of people have the idea of wanting to move, but they're not going any further than that initial idea. Like, hey, I'm looking to sell my house. I'm thinking about, upgrading to another home. And they haven't done the steps to see what that next home is going to cost or if it's even available in the current market. So the very first thing I would ask you to do is go out there and see if you can find that property. Now, depending on where you're located, there might be tons of property that match exactly what you're looking for. Or you might be in a situation like a lot of my clients that are looking at the current inventory saying,
I don't see what I'm looking for out there in the market.
Which is exactly why I'm asking you to do this homework up front, especially if you're looking to move out of area to another location. A lot of people have a belief that they're going to sell here in California, which is a more expensive cost of living for the most part, and in turn they're going to move to a more affordable area. Well, a lot of the more affordable areas have changed over the past years, and real estate has gotten significantly more expensive. So once you've done that initial homework and you see that there's actually property out there in your area, you have an idea of price point, I'm going to ask you, have you talked to a lender to see what it's going to cost to finance that piece of real estate? Now, maybe you're fortunate enough to have enough equity in your property that when you sell your home, you're going to be able to take all of that money and buy the next home in cash. Therefore, you don't really need to talk to a mortgage professional. But more often than not, people are looking to put some of that money in the bank and maybe finance a portion of it. So I want to make sure you've done, again, your homework and seen what it's going to cost to actually finance that piece of real estate. Nearly 70% of homeowners at the moment are sitting on interest rates below 4%. So a lot of people at the moment have a very low interest rate. Well, interest rates as of today are sitting over 7%, which means the cost of money is much more expensive, which means to finance that property, it's going to be more expensive. And if you're in a position where you're looking to size up, you're looking to buy a more expensive piece of property, maybe you've outgrown your current home, well, that typically means not only are you paying a higher interest rate, but you're going to be paying more in property taxes as well. So you just want to make sure you've done that homework prior to putting your home on the market, because the last thing you want to do is put your home on the market, get it under contract, and then find out the piece of property that you're thinking about buying is either not available at all or it's way more expensive than you had initially thought. And the same can actually go for renting. There are people out there that are looking to sell their properties and downsize into something a little less expensive. And that brings me up to a story of a client that I have. He bought his property a couple years ago and he's made some money in that property, and he was looking to sell it and go and rent something. And fortunately for this client, when he purchased his home, he was able to get a 2.25% interest rate on a 30-year fixed because he was a veteran. He got a VA loan. So the cost of money was really inexpensive. So in our conversation about him wanting to sell his home, I asked the question, have you gone out and looked at what properties are going to cost for what you're looking to rent? And he tells me,
Hey Jeb, I haven't done it, but I know it's going to be less expensive because we're looking to move into a less expensive market a little bit further from the beach.
He's currently here in Huntington Beach, and he thought by going inland a little bit to areas like Anaheim and Orange that the cost to rent a property was going to be less than his mortgage. So we were kind of moving things along, and he was kind of on hold for a little bit, and then he called me about 2 weeks later and he said, Jeb, I no longer want to sell my home. And I said, what happened, George? And he said, well, I actually went out and did what you asked me to do, and I looked at what it was going to cost to rent a property, and it was going to be more expensive than the current mortgage on my home. Therefore, it doesn't really make sense for me to put my home on the market and sell it, because the plan was to actually try to save some money. So in that instance, he wasn't saving any money. So please understand, if you're trying to move, just make sure what you're looking for is available. The cost is what you think it's going to be before you make a mistake and put your home on the market and you're not able to get out of it. And the second thing along that same topic is, if you're somebody who, like another potential seller I just had a conversation with, she bought her property for $40,000. It's now worth somewhere around $1 million. She's a single individual, and we were talking about selling her property. And then the topic of capital gains came up out of that conversation. And she was under the belief that if she sold her current home and took a portion of that equity in the property and bought another property, there would be no taxes on that property. Well, she had actually gotten the capital gains rule a little confused, because as a single individual, you only get $250,000 of tax-free gains as a single individual and $500,000 as a married couple, as long as you've lived in that home 2 of the last 5 years. So in the case of her, she bought the home for $40,000. She essentially gets a $290,000 exemption on that property, plus any improvement she's done, plus any cost to sell that home, anything like that, which for her was still going to leave her a sizable amount that she was going to have to pay capital gains tax on. And this is something that she hadn't considered at all, which made her take a step back and wonder whether or not she was making the right decision, because she didn't think she was going to have to pay anything in taxes. And once she realized that, it made her reconsider selling her property. Now, please understand, I'm a real estate agent. I benefit when people sell their homes, but it's also my job to make sure you fully understand the process and what you're getting into, and that you're considering all aspects. Because again, the last thing I want to do is put someone in a situation where they have to sell their home because they've agreed to a contract. So I want you to do all of this legwork up front, so that when you're selling your home, it's a smooth process and you're not trying to figure out ways to get out of it because you made a bad decision. So now that we've considered some of the foundational things that you need to consider when selling your home, we're now going to talk about some of the seasonal things, some of the current things that are happening in the housing market that may or may not affect your wanting to put your home on the market for sale. Well, currently in the market, as I mentioned earlier, we're sitting on record low levels of inventory. So nationwide, we're sitting somewhere around 508,000 homes, which is currently at historically low levels. On top of that, we have buyer demand waning a little bit. Because interest rates have risen so much over the last couple of months, the able buyers out there in the market have dropped off a little bit. So yes, demand is down, but at the same time, inventory is also down. So they're kind of keeping in lockstep with one another. So even though we've had this big drop in demand, because we haven't seen inventory increase in any substantial way, we're still seeing home prices move sideways to up in most markets out there. Now, there are some things that you have to consider when you're looking to sell your home on this market. And that is that you need to price it right to begin with. Trying to stretch the price, trying to shoot shoot for the moon, trying to look at numbers from, say, 2022 back in May at the peak of the market and price your home there probably isn't going to work out in your favor. What you need to do is more or less look at comps in the last 30, 60 days. What are homes selling for in your neighborhood that are comparable to your property, and price it somewhere along those same lines. Don't try to go a lot above it, because there are also some seasonal things happening in the market that we're going to touch on here in just a minute. Now, a year, 2 years ago, if a home sold for $500,000, you could price the next one at $525 or $550. This is not that market anymore. Because you have less able buyers out there in the market, that typically means there's also less competition out there in the market. And competition is typically what drives prices higher. Now, I've been fortunate enough recently to list a couple of properties and price them a little bit lower than I thought they were worth. And because of that, we've been able to drive up the price on that home, creating additional demand. Because people saw value in that number, it brought more buyers to the table, and in turn driving the price up. So in this market, you need to price it at fair market value and or even a little bit below, because that way you have the most potential to drive up that price. But to go back to one of the questions that I asked earlier in the video, if you're looking to sell your home because you think we're at a market top and you're going to be able to buy something lower in the future, I would ask you to pause and just consider what happens if that's not the case. What happens if prices continue to increase? What happens if the market doesn't pull back? What happens if rates continue to go a little bit higher? Would you still be happy with your decision? It's very, very difficult out there to time the housing market. In fact, I've seen the most success from homeowners that have owned their properties for a longer period of time, those that have a longer term time horizon, as well as those that just make their mortgage payment. They're not worried about the day-to-day value of their home, what happens today, tomorrow. There's too many people out there at the moment focused on what Zillow says, what it says today, what it's going to say tomorrow, what it's going to say next week, versus just making their mortgage payment and focusing on the long term. So could there be a potential to sell your home and buy something less expensive in the future? Sure. Do I think that's likely to happen? I don't, because inventory levels are really, really low nationwide and builders aren't building enough homes to keep up with demand. Inventory is going to be a problem for a longer period of time. And as interest rates come down, which they're going to as inflation continues to ease and the economy slows, that usually drives more home buyers into the market, which is going to create more demand and likely keep prices stable, if not moving up even higher. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for you. Just don't be like my clients that sold back in 2019 thinking the market had peaked and currently still renting because they missed the boat. They missed their opportunity. They actually got priced out of the market entirely. Just don't be that person. Now, a moment ago, I mentioned seasonal trends. What am I talking about seasonally that could affect you as a seller in the current housing market? Well, we're moving into that fall market. Depending on where you're located, the weather's probably starting to change a little bit. Vacations are over, the kids are headed back into school, and this is typically a time of the year when inventory really starts to peak and it's likely to diminish throughout the rest of the year. And with that, you usually see less buyer demand out there in the market, which typically means a slower housing market is on its way. Now, the last couple of years have actually been a bit of an anomaly because the housing market remained strong through the fall season. That's not typical. The last 2 years have not been normal in any way. But this year, I expect things to get back more to a cyclical trend like we've seen historically speaking, and the housing market should slow as we move into the fall market. Now, slowing typically means more stable prices. It means less buyer demand out there, it means less inventory, but it just means less transactions out there happening in the market. You know, the spring market is usually the best time to list your home for sale because that's usually when the most buyers are in the market. So right now, if you're considering selling your home, just understand there's probably going to be less buyers out there looking at it, depending on where you're located, which could end up affecting the value of your home. So just make sure you're taking all these things into account if you're looking to maximize price. Now, with that said, I do believe it's still a good time to take advantage of the market to some extent. Now, it's not what it was 5 months ago. It's not what it was a year ago. Even though prices have remained really stable, there's just less competition out there in the market because of where rates are. So just make sure you're pricing your home accordingly to fair market value. You have a professional helping you, working with you. If you need one anywhere nationwide, I've got a huge database of people that I know, like, and trust that can guide you through that process. There's actually a link in the description below. So if you need someone, be sure to check that out. But with that, if I were considering selling my home in this market, I would look at all of those other factors that I talked about earlier in the video. I have a growing family. I'm someone that's looking for property, but because of where interest rates are, the cost to move, I'm kind of staying put at the moment, just kind of waiting to see what happens. And I think there are a lot of people out there in that position, and that's what you have to take into account. Don't get too ahead of yourself. Don't get caught up in the FOMO. Don't get caught up in the crash mentality that you've missed the boat, so to speak. Because inventory is low and you still have demand out there in the market, there's no rush to take advantage of the current housing market, in my opinion. But at the same time, things could continue to change. And as things change, the housing market can change as well. So with that, I hope you found some value in today's video. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you want some additional information about selling your home and my thoughts, do me a favor and check out this video here.